Good evening, folks. How's it going out there? Welcome back here to Monday night. It is September 15th, 2025, 8:44 p.m. That's local time here in California. Latest activity shows a 4.4 earthquake across the Japan region there along the Japan Trench. Looks like we are starting to get a little adjustment down here across this area in terms of stress building up. Got a number of earthquakes out here. This one earlier around noon was fairly deep, 114 miles underneath the Japan region. So strain further building up here across the subduction zone. I don't think we got enough storage built up in terms of stress out here because back in 2011 we had a 9.1 out here. But as always, we could still see some movement in terms of larger activity. Up north here, there's that 6-pointer that stirred up around the Kuril-Kamchatka area. About an hour later or so, we had another 5.0, but this one a little bit further south. We do have to watch the remainder of the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench here, as it does have some potential for some further larger earthquake activity. North of Seattle had a 2.9 this evening. Looks like that got dropped down from a 3.4. That looks like it's on one of these fault systems up here outside of Everett. Number of faults across Washington there could be potentially capable of producing large earthquakes. Some earthquake activity around Mount St. Helens. I don't see anything big showing up there for now. One earthquake over here across the Cascadia Subduction Zone. This is the fold and thrust belt, about 14 miles underneath this area, though, and it's above the tremor level. By the way, tremor counts are, wow, they're elevated, but they're very well confined here to one area underneath the southern coast of Oregon. This is stirring up about 20 miles deep into the subduction zone of the Cascadia. Now, I talk a lot about this, and a lot of people think, well, this is just relieving strain. It's releasing strain, and that they couldn't be more wrong in terms of what it's actually doing here. I want you guys to read this. I pointed out and highlighted an area down here. Now, the Cascadia tremor events are not releasing the pressure that causes megathrust earthquakes. Instead, they indicate that pressure is actively building in the locked area, right? You're getting those slow slip events as the pressure increases across that locked zone, transferring that pressure down and allowing the plate to slip further down into the subduction zone, but also at the same time increasing the locked zones, which could obviously break at any time here. So here's the stress transfer I talk about a lot. As the deep down dip section of the fault slowly slips, it does not release the accumulated energy from the lock zone. Instead, this process of seismic slip and tremor activity transfers and increases stress onto the adjacent locked portion of the fault. I've always said here that whenever the next big one hits out here across Cascadia, it will probably be during a time of heightened slow slip events like we've been seeing here across the southern end of the Cascadia Subduction Zone here recently. In the last week, the majority of the slow slip events has been right where you would expect it, down across the southern end of the Cascadia Subduction Zone. So this is probably not good news across this area. In between big events of a 9.0 or greater, the full rupture of the Cascadia, we do see these partial ruptures occur, and we have not had one. In fact, the last one there was well before 1700. But in between these main full ruptures here, they normally have a partial rupture of the southern end. I'm thinking that's where we could be leading here pretty soon, or a full rupture. That's a worst case scenario. Either way, 325 years have passed, and we've gone on and on about this here in the last few videos. If you want more information on it, I would suggest checking out a website called survivingcascadia.com. It's got so much information that you'll be blown away by the information that's out there. Some you may have heard, some you may not know about, but it's definitely worth a read. Survivingcascadia.com. But tremor counts there in the last week, oh man, they're definitely elevated out here across the southern end of the Cascadia Subduction Zone. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity happening, but I guarantee you that strain is building up. 1.6, one of the latest quakes there, pretty shallow there across the extreme southern end of that subduction zone. San Francisco Bay Area rocking a little bit this afternoon. A 3.3 earthquake coming into the Clayton area. That looks like it's just off of the Greenville fault. Now, not for sure if this, maybe there's another segment that runs up here or not, but it's not listed up here on the map. Either way, that's a sign here of increasing pressure in the Bay Area. So watch that. The Hayward fault well overdue for the big one. It's been past roughly about the time where we should see intervals of large events. We're past that point. So 3.3 and a 2.1 there just about an hour later. West Coast about ready to rock, I have a feeling. Some 2s and some 1s out there across the southern, towards the southern area here along the creeping section of the San Andreas Fault. Nothing on the Parkfield segment yet, but that could be coming up here for a 6-pointer as well. Average intervals run between 20 and 22 years for at least a 6-pointer along that locked area of the Parkfield section, and it was 2004 when that similar magnitude happened there of a 6.0. Ridgecrest area still seeing a bunch of smaller quake activity. Nothing big going on there for now. Of course, 2019 had a July 4th, July 5th sequence of large earthquakes there. One earthquake directly on the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault from this morning, a 2.2. Little bit of activity. It looks like a little swarm down here off the Imperial Fault near Holtville that stirred up here this afternoon. So the West Coast is definitely on the move out here. So just be on guard. Yellowstone National Park, not a whole lot going on up there for now. Just some smaller microquake activity. Oil fields of Texas and Oklahoma, you got it. Still rocking and rolling out there in the liquid gold fields. Let's see what else we have here across the area. New Zealand, some 3s down there. Really nothing big. I still think, though, with all this extra pressure going on up here across the Kuril-Kamchatka, we're either going to see another large earthquake across this region or the West Coast out here is finally going to pop. And that includes the Cascadia Subduction Zone or even the San Andreas Fault section here. There was a little bit of movement up here off the coast of Canada earlier this evening as well with a 4.2 earthquake. So, movement down Southern California. You got Seattle, elevated tremor across the southern end of the Cascadia, movement up north here. Yeah, we're definitely under quite a bit of strain out here. Down across the Middle American Trench, pretty active. Nothing big, just some 2s and 3s. No further activity here across the Caribbean plate for now. Over here across Ecuador and areas north there, got a decent little cluster of quakes there. Almost looks like something's about ready to pop in this area. Pretty close here to the Colombia area. I believe that's where that activity's stirring up. Bunch of 3s, even some 4s mixed in. The Atlantic Ocean, pretty quiet. Not seeing a whole lot of activity. A little bit less active out here across the Mediterranean tonight. A bunch of movement here this morning and yesterday. But things taking a little breather there for now. Crunch zone out here, just typical movement. Like I say, keep an eye. What do we got here? 1.9 right now. That just popped up here onto the map. Looks like that's another earthquake down there across the creeping section here of the San Andreas Fault. Normally when this creeps, basically that's what it does. It just moves along instead of locking up like areas north and south here. It just kind of creeps along. So when this is active, that means that strain out here is building. The pressure is on across the West Coast, and we can see it. Obviously tremor up north, a lot of activity down south here. Just it could happen pretty soon. Let's see if I got a seismograph station out there that picked that up. Looks like it barely got picked up there on the Parkfield section. Just a little 1.9. All right, space weather activity. A lot quieter here tonight as far as the KP index goes. Got really no aurora activity stirring up there for now. Really nothing else there in the forecast. It looks like maybe overnight here could see some unsettled conditions, but if you look here, this is at 721 km a second there. That's pretty elevated in terms of the solar wind speed out there. It hasn't taken a little break yet since the arrival there yesterday. That's a high-speed solar wind stream there from that coronal hole that was facing us a number of days ago. But if you notice, this is about as tight as can be and north as can be in terms of the BT-BZ component here of the interplanetary magnetic field. That is suppressing anything that's coming in and basically doing its job. If you look here, there is a KP index up around 5 right now, but everything's being suppressed because of that BT-BZ component. But should things open up, then obviously we'll see that stir back up here for the auroras. But right now, I don't see anything at all there in near term. Far as, let's see here, sunspots, did they get this fixed? They didn't. This is still a few days old there from the 13th. So the latest one, I guess we got to go with this one here. Looks fairly recent. Pretty good cluster of sunspots out here on the southeastern area of the sun. That hard to say though if it's going to pop off anything. There's a little bit of complexity here within this sunspot core. Also back over here as well. Another newer region up north. I guess we'll see what happens here in the coming days. But right now the flare threat is fairly minimal. Looking at a chance there for about 30% chance there for M-flare activity. 5% has been bumped up, or X-flare has been bumped up to 5% for some reason. I don't know why. I really don't see any X-flare activity potential out there, but that's what it's saying there. Also, a couple different features here on the sun. This is an older image, I can tell, because the coronal hole is much further out here across the western area of the sun for now. Another coronal hole, 80. Northern area of the sun, that's really not going to affect Earth too much once it's in position. Also some filaments out here. Sometimes these can all blast off. There's a fairly lengthy one down south here, and some other bright areas there indicating some sunspots on the eastern limb there that we'll have to watch. Coming up here for the west coast, we got some interesting activity out here in terms of precipitation from a hurricane. I think it's a tropical storm right now. Let's go see what we got. Current storms. Got Mario here. That looks like it's down to tropical storm. This has the potential to bring some rainfall here to the Southern California region and possibly up in Northern California as well. Any other, leftover moisture here will fire up some thunderstorms, and it does look like, let me bring up the model here for the West Coast, California. This has not completely updated yet. Looks like it's waiting. So we're going to have to go back here one run, which is still fairly recent. But I want to show you guys the precipitation that's coming in here. We're going to bring the total accumulated precipitation run, and watch this moisture come in there from the south from that tropical system, Mario. Look at that. That is rare to see the moisture up here all the way to Northern California. I'm liking that though. We need moisture. Last time we had rain out here in my neck of the woods was back in May or so, but pretty dry. Got some huge cracks in my field out there right now. Either way, it looks like maybe some decent precipitation out here for the West Coast. And then it looks like later on there's another system coming down from the north that will increase the precipitation chances out here for the West Coast. So I'm liking it. We'll see what happens here. It looks pretty decent on the weather models here, so got my fingers crossed here that we'll get some precipitation out here. It's looking better and better with each model run there. Ready for fall, folks. I am so ready. I've been ready ever since summer started. I'm not even joking. All right, what else we got here? Seismograph stations, pretty quiet out there. The site right here, Surviving Cascadia, is the site that I'm talking about here. There's a lot of information here, and this graph here is just very important because this goes back and looks at the historical timeline of big earthquakes along the Cascadia Subduction Zone. Now, how do they know? Well, they look at offshore, underwater locations out there. And when there's big earthquakes, it disturbs the sediment, and that's what they do. They go out there and look. They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about when they say that the last big one was 1700. Now, if we go back to the year, or go back 4,000 years or so, which is fairly recent in geological times, there's been 20 Cascadia events, M8 and larger. The 8s there mainly consist of the southern area of the Cascadia Subduction Zone. That's going to be southern Oregon, northern California. Now, there's been 0 events that have lasted this long to where we're at right now. We're at 325 years since the last big earthquake along the Cascadia. There's been no events that has lasted this long. 19 intervals there were less than 325 years. So it's gone. The Pacific Northwest here has gone 100% of known times between earthquakes in the last 4,000 years. The longest interval there was 291 years. That's for the last 4,000 years here until now. That's why I'm trying to point out the important activity that could be coming here to my neck of the woods, and also the folks out here across the West Coast. Cascadia tremor activity, when you see stuff like that brewing, and you look at the earthquake activity that's stirred up out here in the Gorda Ridges here recently, that's almost a breaking point, I think. Look at the last 7 days. Remember that swarm out here? Upper 5, a couple other low-grade 4s. All that is increasing the strain. Ever since this activity stirred up, the tremor counts have been way elevated out here underneath the region. Also seen some fold and thrust belt activity out here. Very small microquakes, but it's a sign here this is about ready to pop, I think. No guarantee, but statistics, right? That's why when you look here at the I just lost my map again. When you look at the statistics and what has happened historically, you can't ignore the facts here that I think we are very close. It could happen tonight, tomorrow, next week, next year, but I don't think it's going to be another 10, 15 years or so. We're already past that time period by a long time in terms of the longest interval there in the last 4,000 years. So we are close. The thing is, are you prepared? You have to be prepared if you want to survive this. I love the name of the site, survivingcascadia.com. It is a survivable event. Many different things out here in terms of scenarios. Look at this. I mean, this is, whoever did this, I think I messaged this person. I can't remember the name here, but remember one night reading everything, I was like, man, I got to get a hold of this person, let them know how much I appreciate this website. But there is a contact information on here somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but anyway, these are all scenarios, like the seasons, if it happens in the winter, spring, summer, fall, what the weather may be like, time of day, and whatnot. And I would suggest going over all of these. That way you know what to do. Drinking water, sanitation, food. Man, this is just a well-written documentation here of surviving the next Cascadia earthquake, which I think we are getting awfully close to right now. Another earthquake down here across the, well, this is just off the coast of Peru. It looks like that's moving down south here now. Yeah, that's a 5.1 coming in here in the last 20 or 30 minutes or so, it looks like. It is working its way down south, south of the Columbia area. But things are, obviously you can look here on the map. They're definitely highly strained out here in this area. So we could see some larger movement out there across anywhere north to south here in this region. This is a big subduction zone, and historically one of the largest earthquakes, well, the largest earthquake ever recorded there in human history, the 9.5, 1960 or 1961, I think it's 1960 there, the Great Chilean Earthquake. That was a big one. So this area definitely capable of producing those type of events. All right, folks, I'm out of here. Just be on guard. Stay safe. I'm out here too, so I'm prepared. I always keep tons of cases of bottled water. You know, sanitation stuff is a must. And, you know, to each their own. Everyone's going to be different in terms of what they need, but I suggest reading that site, Cascadia, survivingcascadia.com. We'll catch you guys out here tomorrow morning for the Tuesday morning update. Stay safe out there, folks.